So many things don't add up in this story, right? And they feel strange. You're former FBI, former CIA. What's your gut check tell you on this one?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, my gut tells me that this is someone that was probably in the midst of some kind of a mental break.
Really? I normally agree with Agent Wilder, but not this time. Mental break? I don't really think so.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. And my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I don't think wanting to disconnect from society is insanity or even a mental break. I think it's more like wanting to be plugged into an insane world 24/7 drives one insane. And a mental break, I would say, happens fairly suddenly and then passes. Hannah seems to have reached a point in her life over weeks, months, and years of extenuating circumstances. Also, her Instagram provides ample evidence of sentiments many of us share, wanting to be free, wanting to be unfettered, wanting magic and mystery and mastery and love in our lives, the beauty of nature in our lives, rather than noise, clutter, and entanglements. In this analysis, I want to ask the simplest but also the hardest of questions.
Who are you?
But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, we will be covering the Manhattan manhunt, dealing with a very disturbing targeted hit that occurred in Manhattan and was actually caught on camera as well. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started. So have you looked at Hannah's Instagram? What sort of impression do you get from it? Now, in our effort to find out the who of Hannah or of any person, where do we begin? You know, if you just met someone, perhaps you saw someone or someone has reached out to you, perhaps you even feel romantic feelings towards someone, but you've just encountered someone kind of completely out of the blue. It's a completely different galaxy that you know nothing about. How do you begin to get to know someone? Well, despite what you may have heard, we do begin by judging a book by its cover. We also look at self-identifying statements. Who does someone say they are? Now, in terms of the former, we know Hannah was young, 30 years old, from Hawaii, single, newly single as well, which possibly is a bigger deal in her becoming unstuck than anything, especially now, but also footloose and filled with fanciful thinking, but then also limited because of limited finances. Now, think about how frustrating that must be, to be someone with this very free-spirited approach, but then you're also stuck because you don't have a lot of money. And perhaps that's part of the reason she went to Mexico, is that dollars could take her further. The cost of living there is also lower. Now, the other side to this is 30 is also a milestone here, like 21 is, and to some people 40 is, and so on. And perhaps this year, Hannah couldn't help but ask herself, what have I done with my life? What am I doing with my life? Isn't it time that I did something important and necessary? Isn't it time that I start my adventure? Now let's look at 6 insights from Hannah's Instagram. Number 1, it's not what you see is what you get. Now, there are a handful of people I've come across in true crime who literally live their lives on social media. They're very transparent. They have their hearts on their sleeves, and it makes it quite easy to tell a lot about them. Shanann Watts is perhaps the most famous. Reva Steenkamp, I was actually friends with her on Facebook. She's the South African model who was shot to death by Oscar Pistorius. She was another. Gabby Petito's social media provided a famously silver lining view when so much more was going on behind the scenes. What about you? Do you disclose everything that's going on social media? I don't. Also know other people who sort of show a certain aspect, but there's a lot that they don't show. And I think some of that is the case here. Do we see Hannah showing any family members, any images of her ex-boyfriend, any images of home. Some people do play their social media cards close to their chest. Now, that's quite if you think about someone being free and unfettered, but in terms of their social media, it's very, I don't want to say secretive, but what that is showing is that there's a sense of wanting to be free, but somehow being suppressed, repressed, or inhibited. And so how do you find a way of resolving that impasse? Number 2, detachment syndrome. For me, Hannah's very last post speaks volumes. Have a look at the white text in the frame. Nike is proceeding in reliance upon this notice and your consent in connection with its production activities here. If you do not wish to give such consent, do not enter this area. If you do come into range of the camera or the sound recording equipment, you will be deemed to have consented to this notice and waived any and all claims you may have. Just think about this whole thing. Do not enter this area. You know, there's some areas you're not free to move in without something being taken away from you. And this disclaimer, it's the very last post you put up. It seems to be further proof that Hannah felt that that she was in an overly restrictive, constrictive society. It also seems to resonate with her, this idea of appropriating one's consent. Not resonate with her in a good way, but something that made her think twice and think about it. Think about appropriating one's consent without actually asking permission. And you kind of have that a lot with social media companies. They ask you to tick a box or something and then they just take all your information. For example, if you live in a country and someone you didn't vote for now makes decisions that are going to affect you without your consent, how do you feel about that? Maybe that resonated with her as well. She really didn't like that idea. That brings us to number 3, itinerant idealism. Hannah seems to have not only a creative spirit, but a restless spirit. More specifically, she is not rooted, which is another way of saying she isn't glued or connected to someone else or something else. Not a job, not family, not a lover, or even a community. And this seems to have been the case for some time, going back almost 500 weeks, which is close to 10 years. Number 4, jack of all trades, master of none. Hannah doesn't seem to have applied herself to any specific area. That's another sort of way to end up being unglued, unstuck, disconnected anyway. There was flower arrangement, there was DJing and photography, but she doesn't seem to have found her calling yet, which at 30 years of age can lead to a kind of existential panic. Number 5, connecting with nature and perhaps her inner child. Around 100 weeks ago in 2022, Hannah posted this about attachment being the root of all suffering. Well, it certainly was for her father, Ryan, who still seemed to have strong feelings of attachment to her. Do you notice how few people replied to or responded to any of her Instagrams? So in a way, I think in a way she's detaching herself, but perhaps in a way to wanting to reconnect, wanting to reattach in another way, perhaps in another place. In this post that she put up 100 weeks ago, she writes, attachment is the root of all suffering, yet we are all divinely interconnected, all having the ability to love, to hurt, to heal, to reach new heights of understanding and compassion, learning how to navigate this complex existence. It's interesting that next to love, she's got hurt and then heal. So it does seem like she did love, she was hurt, she does need to heal. That brings us to number 6. What she doesn't say speaks volumes. Since Hannah has been gone, her silence has spoken volumes. You know, she hasn't reached out to her family. She hasn't responded in any way to the concern about her disappearance and, of course, the fact of her father's death. It's clear that Hannah didn't want to just get out of Dodge. She really wanted to get out of Dodge and stay there. One does have to wonder if there are any big skeletons in the closet we don't know about. If Hannah didn't have a lot connecting her to others, she seemed to have very little connecting her to family, including her mother and father and sister. In sum, much of the chatter surrounding Hannah confirms a very basic problem in today's society: how good we are at surfaces and superficiality, and how bad we are at under-the-skin stuff, subtlety. And there's nothing more subtle than who someone really is. I mean, you literally have an LAPD cop saying in a press conference, if Hannah can't come out of the woodwork and explain exactly what she meant when she posted certain things, we'll never know. That is how bad we are at intuiting someone else's symbolic framework.
I think some of the communication can be interpreted a number of different ways. So at this time, we're not able to interpret those communications without having Hannah present to explain, how she felt when she sent them and what the specific meanings were for those messages.
One does wonder when Hannah is going to return from the wild and connect with the mad world again. Surely it has to be soon. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.